Hi, and welcome to another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. I'm Bridget Burns, the Executive Director of the University Innovation Alliance.
And I'm Doug Lederman, editor of Inside Higher Ed.
Welcome to Weekly Wisdom. And each week, I team up with a journalist to have a conversation with a sitting college president or chancellor to understand what it's like to lead in this moment, to set some context, and to hopefully give you a bit of perspective and inspiration as you head throughout your week. And that's why we call it Start the Week with Wisdom.
This week, we're delighted to bring you a conversation with California Community College's Chancellor Eloy Oakley. Chancellor Oakley is no stranger to many of you or to Weekly Wisdom. His name has come up most recently on social media when the topic of the next administration is raised. Today, we're going to hear his perspective about leading in higher education in 2021 and what he's thinking about these days.
Welcome, Chancellor Oakley.
Great to be with you. Happy Monday.
Yes, happy Monday, and hopefully this week is better than last week. So that's
Let's hope.
Nowhere to go but up. So I wanted to kick off then just how are you doing? Just kind of, can you give us a sense of what it's like to be you in this moment? And obviously you're getting a lot of opportunities to lead unexpectedly.
Well, first, my hair is a lot grayer this time, January compared to last January. But I do, and I really appreciate how you just couched this. It is and has been an opportunity to lead. And, so many of us come into these positions and, we enjoy the trappings of the position. But it's times like these when, it is time to step up and time to really do what is necessary to support our students. So while 2020, I'm glad it's gone. I do appreciate all the resiliency, all the wonderful activity that I saw our system and higher ed in general across the nation do and kick in. So I'm very appreciative of that opportunity.
So I would just ask, I guess broadly, and then Doug can dive into some more of the specific topics of today. I'm curious about how your leadership evolved as a result of last year. I think that too often we're focusing on how difficult things were. And I just want to know, how has that resilience shown up for you? And how are you a better leader as a result of what we went through?
No one anticipates going into 2020 or any year the way that it unfolded. I don't know that I ever thought that I'd be leading through a pandemic. Certainly, I've always thought that, leadership through economic crisis, in California earthquakes, some flooding, maybe fires, all that is part of the deal. Certainly in leading in California and in many places throughout the country. But, you don't anticipate leading through a pandemic, economic crisis, racial reckoning, and a crisis in democracy. So, what I've learned over the last year has been, resiliency is key. And in my role, trying to continue to support our leaders throughout the system in California. We have a big system. We have a lot of people and a lot of students. And because there was so much uncertainty, and I think we can't underestimate the uncertainty that 2020 brought. We're used to thinking about planning and working through a crisis, but in this crisis, we had no idea what was on the other end. We began by coming to our homes and thinking that this would be over in 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, in 5 weeks. And here we are almost a year later, still working through this. So I've really had to continue to support our leaders in California and keep them moving forward, keep finding the silver lining, and not worrying too much about all the crisis that was happening around us. So, for me, this is really one of the first times that I really had to lean into and go back and use my experience in the military to help me keep moving forward. Because, that's what we learned in the military is you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You just have to get up and keep moving forward. And fortunately, in California, we had a lot of leaders that just kept moving forward, and we're still moving forward because who knows when this is all going to end.
Well, and that's, yeah. And if you don't mind, that's, I guess what I'm thinking about, it's obviously we're all hoping 2021 is a lot better than 2020, but it's not like a switch has been flipped and we're suddenly God knows, last week was just hell for a lot of us for a variety of reasons. So how do you think about the continual regeneration and the sort of what's basically becoming a continued kind of permanent sprint? How do you keep employees and colleagues motivated and sustained? Maybe some of us got a week or two off for the last few weeks, a little bit maybe, but how do you start anew, knowing that you've got another open-ended stretch like that potentially?
Well, I think it's a great point. It has been a constant sprint because we just did not know where the finish line is, and we still don't know, quite frankly. I mean, I think we feel better about that light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to believe it's not a train, but still, we're still, I mean, in the thick of this. And so the mental toll that it's taken on people, particularly in leadership roles, it's been tough. I mean, not being able to do what you're most comfortable doing. And that's certainly the case for me. I am used to being in front of people. I'm used to going right toward the problem. I'm used to going to the crisis. And I've had to keep myself in front of this camera for almost a year. And that's tough. But, we have to keep highlighting the importance of the work that we do and how it's so critically important to this generation of students. How critically important it is that we not allow a generation of students to be left behind. This is what we were fighting for before the pandemic, to increasing equality, ending systemic discrimination. And so we've seen that so crystal clear in this year that we have to keep highlighting why what we're doing right now, as uncomfortable as it is so important to the future.
Yeah, that's a great segue to one of the topics that we'll want to talk about. And actually, I want to talk about it first, which is the enrollment data that we saw about last fall really showed disproportionate impact on the students who have historically fared least well in higher education. Students at community colleges, low-income students, some certain underrepresented minority groups, and certainly have heard a lot of presidents and others talk about concerns about what had been, I think, some momentum for equity in higher education pre-pandemic. And I guess I'm curious, sort of, as you look at sort of the enrollment numbers that your institutions and nationally have encountered, what do you make of the enrollment declines for particularly those sort of disadvantaged students, and how concerned are you about a sort of a slowing or a reversal of the momentum that maybe we had started to see a little bit in the pre-pandemic times?
So I'm very concerned, and this is an alarm bell for all of us. I mean, the California community colleges have experienced enrollment decline for this past fall semester. And what we're seeing is the impact that the pandemic and particularly the economic fallout has had on our students. We already knew going into this crisis that we had high rates of food insecurity. We had high rates of housing insecurity. And then we walk into this crisis and we have the rug pulled from underneath these students even further. Many of them have families to feed. Many of them, lost their jobs, lost hours. So it should not be surprising that they are suffering and not able to take the same number of courses that they did, are struggling to figure out where to live, how to make ends meet, waiting for that next stimulus check, waiting for somebody to help them. So that's been our primary concern. And that's why I'm so proud that we're working with Governor Newsom. We've prioritized emergency aid in the governor's 2021, 2022 budget. I think that will go a long way. We're also hoping that the Biden administration will also come back again with another round of support for our students. So that is the most important thing right now. Students are on the edge. Some of them are falling off the edge, and we need to pull them back.
So your name has come up in conversation when people are thinking about whether it's Undersecretary or Deputy Secretary of Education, and I'm sure that's flattering and also very intimidating because who knows how that stuff happens. I'm curious that if that were to happen, let's just magic wand that. Given that you have such a keen eye on the challenges students are experiencing and the most vulnerable students especially, I'm just wondering what would be your first priorities, especially when you're talking about how you're seeing students be impacted right now and how we've seen your leadership show up, as you mentioned, on food and housing insecurity.
So the priority has to be students' basic needs. This is not just true in California, this is true across the country. These are some of the most vulnerable students. In addition, how do we better serve adult learners? These adult learners, these workers, individuals who were in jobs that are either gone or significantly changed. Not everyone can go work at Amazon, not right now. Not everyone, we need to be able to find employment, stable employment. If anything, what we're seeing right now is the discontent in working class America. And we've got to do something. Community colleges are in the best position to reach these individuals. They are the most trusted higher education segment in the country. And we need to deploy those resources right now. So those would be the priorities. And I hope those are the priorities for the Biden administration. I'm confident that they are, given that the First Lady understands this problem very acutely.
So there's obviously a lot of different directions that a new administration, a new Democratic administration might go. There's over the last year and a half, we've seen a lot of debate about free college and free community college. There's also been prioritizing of sort of the doubling of Pell Grants, et cetera. When you think about the sort of the beyond the emergency aid that you were talking about and we might see in a stimulus bill, what's your sense of sort of what the both the likeliest and the most preferred sort of major policy initiatives might be for an administration?
So one, broadly speaking, we need to better democratize access to higher education. We have to understand that a high school diploma is not enough anymore to be successful in this economy. So we need to look at this as creating better access to every resident of the United States, and continue to move away from being selective and move toward being inclusive. The second thing is we have generation of students who are being crushed by student debt. We're going to need to deal with that. And I know that's a controversial issue in some quarters, but we cannot allow for a whole generation of indentured servitude to happen. These young adults need to be able to access the creation of wealth, and they can't do that when they're being crushed by student debt. And all that leads to discontent. All that leads to, poor decision making. All that leads to a whole generation of individuals who feel like they're no longer being represented in this country. So I think that's got to be a priority. Free college, California created the California College Promise. We have states like Tennessee, red states like Tennessee, that have done amazing work. I think we need to take that seriously. We need to look at the best models, and we need to think about how do we incentivize all 50 states to do something similar.
Not to have you talk about the hardest moment we've had in American history in a while, but I'm just wondering if you could share your thoughts. You've talked about democratizing, and I think I agree, expanding broad participation. But I'm just wondering, as we think about the role that higher education plays relative to preservation of our democracy and just kind of what we're seeing. Are there any things that you think at the federal level that can be done that would be as focused as possible to addressing what we saw last week in terms of everything that happened?
Well, I know, myself included, we're still a bit disturbed over what I saw. But in addition to holding people accountable for what happened last week, which I think would send a clear message about what is and what is not acceptable in the United States, I think specifically to higher education, we have to recognize that there are a lot of people in this country who don't feel like they can participate in the economy anymore. And a lot of people who need to have access to the kinds of skills that allow them to feel fulfilled in the economy. I think we have to take that seriously. And we have to look at not just both coasts, but we have to take a hard look at Middle America and figure out how we help displaced workers get engaged in this economy. And that is clearly the job of community colleges and higher ed more broadly. The other thing, and I know that this sounds could come across as a bit self-righteous, but we have to demonstrate what the behavior that we want to see reflected in society. What we're seeing in the polarization in our politics, we need to break that chain. And I think higher ed plays a critical role in that. We have to use this as an opportunity to engage with students in our community about what truly is democracy and what do we need to do to keep democracy going. Because what we saw last week was not democracy. And we need to pull back from that very quickly and begin to engage in a conversation, regardless of which side you're on this issue, about what do we need to do as citizens of this democracy to keep it alive.
I appreciated that you didn't stop after the first of those two. There's a fair number of people in the higher ed or in the post-secondary education and training ecosystem who might have focused primarily on the first, and obviously that's hugely important and can't be underestimated. But the second focus on the institution's importance in creating humanity and building out a sense of the sharing of information and the importance of facts and all that and the importance of interaction that is thoughtful, even when it's disagreeing, can't be underestimated.
Right. Well, and those of us in higher education, I mean, we have to recognize that those of us who have education, I mean, we're looked at as now, elite. So we have to be very careful not to talk down to everyone else. And we have to open the doors to more Americans and give them the same opportunity that those of us who have gotten a higher education have.
Great. Well, thanks for taking the hardball question. This one I hope is a bit more of a softball and perhaps something you want to answer, which is four-year institutions frequently talk to me about how they ask about how to be a better partner to community colleges. What are the things tactically that they need to focus on first? Is my question for you. Is that if I'm an institution who really wants to show up as an extremely just the best possible partner to a community college, from your perspective, what's the first thing that someone should do?
Well, my answer is probably going to irritate a few people, but the first thing that has to happen is we need to check our egos. Higher education is full of egos, particularly the higher up you go, from R1 down to community colleges. There's a lot of egos. And we need to understand that we're all working together. Yes, we have different roles, but not one role is not more important than the other. One set of faculty is not more important than the other. And so that is the first thing that has to happen, because the culture has to change in order for true partnership to happen. Once that happens, and I've seen that happen, it is possible, then it just becomes about focusing on the student, putting the student at the center of the design process or the redesign process. What does the student need from all the institutions that are contributing to that person's education, and then working backwards from there? And, you know, regardless of who gets to offer the class or what kind of articulation do you need, that's all stuff that we create that just makes it harder and harder for students. So we need to redesign this, and redesign it in a way that puts the student at the center.
So when you think about what about this moment in particular, and what we've all been through, what is giving you, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What's giving you hope and optimism that 2021 might be better than 2020, and what's getting you and enabling you to motivate your people? What's giving you that kind of optimism right now?
Well, what gives me optimism is our students, the way that they have responded in 2020. I have seen students organize themselves to provide food to local communities, to their own student colleagues. I've seen them raise money. I've seen them organize. And, you know, the 2020 presidential election gave me hope as well. Students, young people organized, and they came out and they voted. What I see going on in Georgia gives me hope. People are using their constitutional rights to change the direction of this country. That gives me hope, because I tell you what, this set of adults in leadership right now, we need a change. We're going in the wrong direction, and I'm very hopeful. I know we love to bash the younger generation, but it is this generation coming up that gives me a lot of hope, and I can't wait to see them in leadership.
Well, I couldn't think of a better way to end our conversation today. So thank you so much, Chancellor Oakley. We really appreciate you instilling us with a sense of perspective and reminding us about just how much resilience we developed in the past year. And hopefully we can draw deep on our courage as we face the challenges ahead, which hopefully are going to be a little bit better in the coming weeks. So thank you so much. We sincerely appreciate your time. For folks who want to follow up and connect with you, what is the best way? Should they just contact you on Twitter or follow? Obviously, you should follow Eloy on Twitter, but is there anywhere else that you think would be useful to send folks?
Yeah, certainly Twitter. People are welcome to DM me, but also I have an email address at the Chancellor's Office, California Community Colleges. It's just eoakley@cccc4cs.edu.
Awesome. Well, we hope that doesn't result in a massive backlog of emails for you. And we look forward to you starting your TikTok account, because we can just see that happening in the future with your appreciation of young folks. All right. Well, Doug, thank you again for being an excellent co-host.
Great to be here.
We hope that this has been inspiring for you, and we look forward to talking to you next time.